the GlaDEAtor. Hello, good evening. This is the GlaDEAtor. I'm back at you again today for another story that I've done during my time with the Drug Enforcement Administration, the DEA. Today's story is going to be a little different than the ones that you normally have heard me discuss. Some of the cocaine traffickers, some of the people who are involved in crack cocaine use and sale. And again, DEA primary responsibility is to arrest drug traffickers, drug dealers. And today's story is going to be a little different, only because sometimes you're just not familiar with all of the things that DEA does. And I will start to say, my time at DEA was a special agent. I carried a gun. I carried a weapon. I carried a firearm. All of the time, even off duty. And the thing about DEA, along with other federal agencies, federal agents, FBI, ATF, Secret Service, Internal Revenue agents, these are all 1811 positions with the DEA. And we are allowed to carry our firearms even on an airplane. A lot of people don't know that, but we have to carry our firearm it's a must that you carry your firearm on an airplane. So that's just a little side note I wanted to tell you. But I also want to tell you about some of the other responsibilities and other positions that the DEA has besides special agent position. And this story is going to be surrounding another part of DEA in a very important position, which are diversion investigators. And these are people who work pharmaceutical cases, work doctor cases. This is the part of DEA that issue license, issues doctor their medical license, issued pharmacists their license to practice dispensing of medicine and prescription. DEA does that. They hold those licenses and making sure that these people comply with the regulations that DEA has come about. So I will start with saying this case was different. Again, it was different. And I learned a lot on this one. And we're going to start by, it was around 1994, in the summer of 94. I was working in Memphis, doing my normal thing, or trying to work cases. And I get a call from Nashville, Tennessee, from the diversion investigators. The diversion investigators. Again, as I just say, they do compliance investigation. They do audits on pharmaceutical companies and kind of keep up with the amount of pharmaceuticals that they distribute to some of the doctors and pharmacists. And while they was conducting the audit, as they told me, they suspected a doctor in West Tennessee was illegally selling a lot of illegal steroids. And as I was speaking with them on this telephone, they was telling me about a doctor in Camden, Tennessee, who, from their records, indicate was selling quite a bit of pharmaceuticals, substance, primarily steroids, anabolic steroids. And as you know, that these guys, steroids are primarily used for medical conditions. And this doctor, who's a veterinarian, he's primarily is a person that treats animals and pets. And so these diversion investigators are very thorough in what they do. And on a side note, diversion investigators do not carry weapons. They are not armed. They primarily dress up in suit and ties and go out to some of the doctor's office, some of the pharmaceutical companies, and do audits. They're primarily like an accountant when it comes to making sure these pharmacists and physicians are complying with their dispensing of controlled substance. They also kind of control or monitor the supply of pharmaceuticals and controlled substances and chemicals to make sure that they meet the legitimate medical and commercial use. Okay? So these are diversion investigators. Okay? They have a very important job as part of DEA. And I would say that, and I learned a lot on this case. So as I was talking with them, and they asked me to meet them in Camden, Tennessee. This was around June of 1994. And I had never been that part of Tennessee before. Camden, which is in Benton County, Tennessee. I drove up there to meet them, and we met, and the reason why they needed me is that as a special agent, I'm the only one that could carry a firearm on the scene. These diversion investigators do not carry firearms, and they knew that. Just in case anything went down, they needed a special agent there to ensure their safety. Of course, they was going to do their job, and they was good at doing their job, but they needed me primarily as a person to effect the arrest and to ensure their safety. And we devised a plan, we talked, discussed it, and they identified a veterinarian there in Camden, Tennessee, who they suspected had a lot of suspicious activity going on, and we set up surveillance. I remember driving by this veterinarian office and just laying my eyes on the place to make sure I had the correct address. And we all did. We was all in separate vehicles, and we had gotten a police officer on standby just in case something happened. One of the locals, PDs there, I can't remember whether it was a Benton County Sheriff officer or Tennessee Highway Patrol officer or someone, but I know we had a uniformed car on standby, to ensure our safety. And they're just smart. They're just part of the plan and part of the smartness of all of it. And I'll never forget, as I was sitting out there on surveillance, and another side story, while I was sitting there listening to my radio, and a couple of days before I made it there to Camden, Tennessee, I remember O.J. Simpson's wife had been murdered like 1 or 2 days before I made it there. And all over my radio, I remember the news was saying O.J. was the suspect in Nicole Brown Simpson murder. And I'm thinking, that was just part of why you're sitting there doing surveillance. You can't just sit there and not do anything. But I was listening to the radio, and I just remember this occasion that was occurring. So, as we sitting there watching the place, I remember we got there early, and we saw him show up, and the doctor was described as an older white male with his veterinary clinic there in Camden, Tennessee. And I believe it was on one of the main roads there in Camden, Tennessee at the time. So we was able to set up and watching him. And about around 11 or 12 o'clock that day, a vehicle showed up. A young white guy gets out, goes into the place, and I say about 15, 20 minutes later, he came out, got into his SUV, and before he got in there, I noticed that he had boxes. He has a couple of boxes in his hand. And it was curious to me why somebody from Shelby County, because that's the tax he had, was from Shelby County, why would they have to come to Camden, Tennessee for anything? Knowing all the veterinarians that they are still in Memphis that they could see for their pets and animals. I was sitting there in the vehicle, took off, heading back west as though it was going back toward the Memphis area. And we follow it, and finally we got one of the uniformed cars to light the car up, to stop it. And when it stopped it, we pull up behind the deputy who walked up to the vehicle and asked the drivers for his license. I saw that happen, and he asked the driver to get out. And once the driver got out, I could see it was a muscular-bound white guy, white male. Looked like an athlete. And eventually, the uniform officer conducted a search on this guy's vehicle and pulled out several of those boxes we saw that he left this doctor's office with. Let me say this doctor was named Dr. Bomar. If I hadn't already mentioned him, I believe that was his name, Dr. Bomar. Bomar. And the officers found these boxes of steroid, and we asked the officer to take the person, the white male, back to a location where we could talk to him. And he did. We talked to him, interviewed him, and found out what he had in his possession were boxes of anabolic steroids. And these steroids are controlled, and they were controlled at this time. And I remember during my time on the Memphis Police Department, I remember steroids were not controlled. They didn't come up under the Controlled Substance Act, which is Title 21 under U.S. Code. But this time, around 1991, they made steroids a controlled substance. And while we're sitting there talking to him, asking him what he doing, and he confessed and said he had came to Camden to buy these illegal steroids, and he needed them for his personal use, which was a lie. You could tell because he had like 3 or 4 boxes of all type of steroids. Some of them was the ones that you could use orally, that you could take as a pill. The other ones were the ones that you could inject. And he had an assortment of steroids. And it's not usual for a private person like that to have these type of steroids. We knew what he was doing. He was buying them for distribution. And we spoke with him, and he identified this guy as a guy by the name of Chester Morgan. Chester was from Bartlett, Tennessee. And as I began to talk to him, and even you could tell he was nervous, he was kind of arrogant, he was kind of just didn't want to ask all the questions. But finally he did. And he told us what he was doing. He was buying the steroids for distribution. He would take them back to Memphis, and he would sell them to some of the guys at the gyms, some of the notable gyms there in Memphis. And he also would sell them to some of the wannabe wrestlers. And for all y'all that's familiar with the wrestlers, the local wrestlers there in Memphis, and some of the well-known one at the time, he called all their names, and I can't remember all their names, and I don't want to share any of the names that I can't really verify at this time. But some of the names with people on the wrestling circuit that was quite familiar with the local public there in Memphis. He said he sold some of these steroids to them, and they would use them to make their body look more muscle-bound, to make a long story short. And a lot of testosterone, which is they all want, all of these bodybuilders want, and testosterone is used for promoting muscle growth. And it helps their body appear to be as though they've been pumping iron, but actually they have not been pumping iron. They've just been taking these roids to make themselves look physically fit. And these are all anabolic steroids, all of them. And he was giving me a lesson on steroids use. And as he was telling me this, I'm writing all this down. And I finally got a statement from him where he confessed how often he had been doing it, traveling to Camden, Tennessee from Memphis, how often, what he was buying from his doctor, Bomar, how much, how often had he been doing this. That's the information I wanted for prosecution purposes. We had already caught him red-handed, so now we're trying to flip him. And as he was telling me this information, he mentioned a guy named Terry Story. And Terry Story was actually from Camden, Tennessee. Terry Story had introduced this guy, Chester Morgan, to this Dr. Bomar. Chester had took over traveling to Camden to pick up drugs from Terry Story. And we got all that information so we can further this investigation, find out who is the big person, who is the mastermind about all this. And it may appear to you as a listener that steroid use is not that big of a deal. But long-term steroid use can cause a whole lot of medical issues. Like the use of the testosterone can shrink your testicles. And I've seen this personally. I have. It can cause cancer. These are things that most people don't realize when they use steroids. I remember one police officer in Memphis who was known to use steroids back in the 80s. And it turned out that he had cancer in his scrotum or testicles. They actually had to cut the boy's testicles off to kill the cancer. And when I last checked, he was still living. But this is what a lot of steroid use can cause to you. It causes all types of problems that you're not aware of. It can cause problems in your kidneys and problems in your liver. And also it can make you addicted to it. But these guys who trying to be bodybuilders in these gyms, they don't really care about that. They just care about the short-term use and how their appearance is and how their body is. So we got all that information from old Chester, and I contacted my DEA people back in Memphis, which was still in Memphis. And like I say, I was the only one in Camden at the time. And I told them to meet Chester at his address in Bartlett and conduct a search on his house. And Chester would be heading that way, because I couldn't go with Chester at the time. We had seized the drugs, but now we just want to make sure he didn't have any more drugs at his residence. And some of my guys did go to Chester's house and wait on him and did conduct a search. I instead stayed there in Camden, and we secured the steroids that we had found in Chester's vehicle, and we went back to this Dr. Beaumar's place there in Camden. And the diversion investigators needed to go back because they wanted to check the doctor's books and do an audit. And we went back there, and I remember, as a lot of times, you are the only black guy there on the scene. And so I'm the one knocked on the door and told the doctor who I was and entered his office. And I remember the office, it was junky. I mean, if this guy was keeping records, I don't know where he was keeping them at. I mean, this place was very unorganized, as I say. And this doctor, old doctor, I mean, he was supposed to be 80 years old, but when you looked at him, he may have looked like a 55, 60-year-old man. And come find out, he'd been using steroids too. These steroids were making him look kind of young for his age. I mean, he looked like he had some muscles for an 80-year-old man. And he just kept staring at me. He just kept staring at me. He wasn't staring at none of my white counterparts. He was staring at me, and I was staring back at him. I didn't really care at that time. I'm the one that had the gun. And plus, not that I wanted to use it, because I didn't, but I wasn't really worried about it. But he just kept staring at me, just looking at me, and I wasn't doing any searching. I was just staring at him. We were sitting there staring at each other. I'm staring at this old guy. He looked like he about 55 or 60, got some muscles, and I don't know what he was thinking, but it was kind of funny to me. I don't know what he was thinking. But we conducted our search, took all the documents we needed to take, at least the diversion people did. There was about 3 or 4 of us diversion people. They had a team, and they took all the information. They took the records, and they notified him right then that he was no longer able to practice the medical science of veterinarian. They seized his license and shut him down right there. Okay? And that was the end of Dr. Beaumar's veterinary clinic there in Camden, Tennessee. The next day, as I had instructed Chester Morgan to meet me at the DEA office and for a formal statement, and he did. He came to my office, and I re-interviewed him again, got the additional information. He explained how this steroid operation was going, that one of his primary customers was this guy, Terry Story, S-O-T-R-Y. Terry was hooked up with these local wrestlers. They would meet and wrestle, and some of them would buy steroids, and they needed these steroids for their appearance, to make them look, again, all muscle bound, all of that. That's what they need them for. And we had Chester to place a call to this Terry Story, because I want to verify, was he telling the truth or not. I did. And we set up an operation where we wanted to bring Terry Story into this whole conspiracy. And we did. The two of them discussed on the telephone where to meet and how much steroids that Chester had. And, of course, Terry needs some. And we identified where Terry lived at. We put surveillance on his location. And the next thing, we followed Chester to the location while Chester had on a body recorder, wire, as you would say, all of that, just to make sure we get all the evidence that we need. And I also had informed, I remember the assistant U.S. attorney at the time of what we was about to do and what we had already done. And we followed Chester to a meet location, and we waited on Terry Story to arrive. And we had already found out that Terry Story was driving a pretty white GMC Yukon. And I remember it was a very brand new Yukon, like a brand new 1994 Yukon. Very nice vehicle. And the reason why that was important to me, because I could see myself driving it. And as you know, DEA can seize these traffickers' vehicles and their property and their assets, and particularly when they use in facilitating a drug crime. And this was about to happen. And we did wait on Terry Story to meet, and Chester was sitting there waiting on him. And Terry Story pulled up in his nice, smacking, brand new Yukon vehicle. And he got out and they talked. And we rushed in. And police, put your hands up, DEA, police, put your hands up. And we arrested him. I remember we had tackled this muscle-bound guy, and put him on the ground, handcuffed him, put him in the backseat of my car, and we took him back to my office. And he had actually brought money there to buy some of these steroids from Chester. We seized this vehicle, went back to the office. I tried to interview him, but he lawyered up. And lawyered up is a term where he asked to speak to his lawyer. So we immediately advised, which we had previously advised him his rights, and he lawyered up. And we then took him to the U.S. Marshal's office in the federal building downtown Memphis and turned him over to the marshals. And he did make bond. And a couple of months later, we did a roundup of this doctor back in Camden, Tennessee. And he actually turned himself in, because sometimes a person like that, that's the procedure. Just notify them that they're on indictment and have them turn themselves in. And he turned himself in. And I remember that when I saw him this time, that 80-year-old man looked like an 80-year-old man. This time, he actually looked like an 80-year-old man. This dude was all wrinkled up, looked like he could barely see. I guess we had cut off his supply of steroids. So he actually looked like an 80-year-old man. And he wasn't as arrogant as he was, and he wasn't as brazen as he was previously when the first time I had met him. And he actually didn't even look at me. And he refused to look at me. So this was a different person. And he actually went to jail or did some time, maybe not much time for his age. I can't remember that, but I'm sure he paid some type of fine. And we did seize other assets from him in Camden, Tennessee, for his illegal steroid use and sale that he did, which was all illegal. But the whole point of this whole story is that These are cases that you don't hear every day about, but they happen. And I want to give a shout out to the diversion investigators in DEA who actually do a good job arresting and sometimes having to bust some of the pharmacists and some of the physicians here in the U.S. So that was an interesting case for me. The first time I had been involved in something like that. And in summary, I would say I learned a lot from it. I learned a lot about it, antibiotics, steroid use, and who uses them, and the illegal side of it, also the legal side of it. So, again, I hope you enjoyed this story by the GlaDEAtor. So if you did, please share, please like, please subscribe, and let others know that we have some interesting stories for you. This is the GlaDEAtor. I'm going to sign off now. Until we meet again, until we talk again. Have a good day and stay safe. Talk to you later. Bye. I want to give a credit to this music in the background. Is by Shady Rock. Shady Rock. Into Your Mind. The hit sound Into Your Mind by Shady Rock. The GlaDEAtor.
Thank you for watching The GlaDEAtor. Tune in next week for another